Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to another installment in our Reviewed and Ranked series. Today we are continuing our progress through the base roster of the storyline characters, and that of course brings us to the Reaper of Justice, Ghost Rider. And this character has a lot of very interesting things to go over, so I hope that you're excited as I am to have a closer look at what this character brings to the table. As always, make sure you check to see if you're subscribed to the channel. If you're not, please feel free to fix that, as the subscription is free and easy, and I have videos coming your way every single day. Feel free to drop a like on today's episode if you find it helpful and or enjoyable. And with all that, let's take a closer look at Ghost Rider. To start off, we need to address the different team build synergies that Ghost Rider brings to the table. He has 5 team building synergies to make note of. He has 2 in the strength category, those being anti-heroes and Fantastic Four reserve member, 1 in the mastery category with the Midnight Suns, 1 in the vitality category with gods and demons, and 1 in the resilience category with Back in Black. So he does have the ability to flesh out or round out the roster of characters, and he even synergizes fairly well with a couple of the DLC characters, which we will be covering much later on in this series. But for now, we need to transition over and talk about what he's like using on the battlefield. And of course, as always, we start with the basic attack sequence. Ghost Rider has 3 hits in his basic attack, all involve a forward lashing swing with his chain, so they are melee attribute typed, and this does provide Ghost Rider with a decent amount of range, as he does not have to be right up close and personal with the opponents that he is facing off against, even just when using his basic standard attacks. And they do come out at a decent speed and provide that cushion of preventing the grunt type characters from retaliating as you attack into them, so quite nice in the crowd control area despite the low combo count. Ghost Rider's heavy attack also utilizes the chain, but it is one very strong forward reaching lash with that same weapon, and it slams down onto the ground and will create a line of impact, knocking back non-mighty characters in the wake of that attack. So also a very nice, decently ranged attack that he can use when conducting combat. Ghost Rider is the first character that we have looked at so far that only possesses a jump. He does not have a double jump, nor a fly, or any other sort of movement capability, so he does suffer a little bit on that front, but he kind of falls into the tank category with that reduced movement, so it's not entirely unexpected nor unacceptable that he only has a jump at his disposal. Ghost Rider's falling aerial involves a fisted strike down into the ground, which kind of resembles the superhero landing pose. There's not a whole lot of opportunities Ghost Rider will have to use this attack, but it does provide that impact area upon landing on the ground. So if you can find an opportunity to use it that isn't better benefited by other attacks in Ghost Rider's kit, by all means feel free, but you have to deliberately make sure that you set up that type of opportunity, as it does not come about naturally. Ghost Rider's block and dodge animation involves him stretching that chain out in front of him to kind of cross up incoming blows. Of course, it doesn't deal any sort of damage or trip characters up in that regard, but it is a unique blocking animation to him specifically, and his dodging animation is a fairly standard role that you see consistent among a lot of the members of the cast. So now that we have discussed all of those items, we can move on to talk about the character-specific abilities that Ghost Rider possesses. And the first ability on this list is the Blazing Skull. This involves a large wave of flames in the direction the character is facing, and as you can see in this clip, the direction of those flames can be manipulated by tilting the joystick as the ability is being carried out. It also has the ability attribute Fire, in addition to the energy attack type and the synergy trait Burn. It's a very well-rounded attack in terms of being conservative on the energy point consumption with that classification of C, as well as having an A class in damage, which means that this is a very nice attack to use as crowd control or burning down some lower level grunts that you will encounter, though it does severely lack in the stagger category as it has an F classification there. As this attack is ranked up, it has a reduced energy point cost and increased attack damage, which is fairly standard across all abilities. But this attack will add the fire element to ally attacks when used in a synergy type setting, which will only help increase marginally the damage output of the crew. And finally, upon fully leveling up this attack, it will have a reduced chance of being interrupted. The second ability Ghost Rider possesses is the Raging Inferno. This involves Ghost Rider hitting the ground directly in front of him and releases multiple pillars of flames in about 150-degree area out in front of where he is facing. Those flames will rush out in those directions, and you'll see that there are 5 of them that take off. So another very nice use of crowd control at Ghost Rider's disposal. As this attack has the energy and burn synergy trait, it looks fairly similar to the Blazing Skull, though it does lack a little bit in a couple of categories. It has a lower damage threshold with the category of C, but it does benefit more from having a larger area of effect than that of the Blazing Skull. It holds its consistent EP consumption of C and has slightly better damage to the stagger gauges with the classification of D. And much like the Blazing Skull, upon being ranked up, it will have a reduced energy point cost, an increased attack damage, the addition of the fire element to ally attacks, and finally a reduced chance of being interrupted. Ghost Rider's third ability is the Hellfire Chain. This involves Ghost Rider swinging his burning chain in an area around his head. This will attack any enemies in the vicinity of that attack, and it still maintains that fire attribute, though it does not offer the benefit of adding the fire aspect to your allies' attacks. Instead of having an energy and synergy trait consistent with what we've looked at, this one has the melee attack type and the area assault synergy trait. This attack will execute in that area. It is not an attack that you can mash to continue using, and it takes up a lot of space, so you're bound to catch up a lot of different enemies in this area, further adding to Ghost Rider's overall crowd control capabilities. This allots Ghost Rider the C class to damage, C class to energy point consumption, and rounds out quite nicely with the C classification to stagger damage inflicted. And consistent with a lot of abilities we've already looked at with this series, has a reduced energy point cost, increased attack damage, increased damage done to the stagger gauge, and a reduction to the attack being interrupted. The final ability that Ghost Rider possesses is the Hell Cycle. This involves Ghost Rider summoning and mounting his burning motorcycle before racing it into the direction out in front of him. This still maintains that ability attribute of fire, but again lacks the ability to combo in and add that fire attribute to your allies' attacks. This perhaps has the best overall utility in terms of all-around damage, but there is a fairly heavy trade-off. You have the B classification in damage, a subpar D classification in energy point consumption, and finally an A classification to stagger gauge damage. But the thing you have to be cautious with about this attack is not only does it use more energy points, especially when used in a synergy attack format, but it also sends you racing across the battlefield. So you may not have the opportunity to follow up and unleash more attacks to characters that you've just raced through, especially if you have depleted their stagger gauge in using that. It's not to say that the attack doesn't have any uses, but you have to be very specific about when you're using it and make sure that you have other members of your team that can quickly follow up on that attack. And consistent with the Hellfire Chain, the Hell Cycle has a reduced energy point cost, an increase to attack damage dealt, increase to damage done to the stagger gauge, and that reduction of the attack being interrupted when the attack is fully upgraded. The last thing we need to look at is the extreme attack that Ghost Rider possesses, and boy oh boy is this a flashy attack. It involves Ghost Rider summoning that Hell Cycle again, doing a large circular area attack, which can't really be influenced but does reach a fairly large circle as it encompasses the enemies directly in front of him. And finally, he rises up into the air before latching back down onto the ground with that chain and pulling himself into the impact zone. The entire attack takes place in the span of just over 7 seconds, but deals a very high amount of damage in spite of the rather lengthy animation to carry out the extreme attack. It's nothing to shy away from though, because any enemies caught within the center of that final hit will be dealt large amounts of damage to compensate. Just make sure that you are near a large collection of enemies when detonating this attack to get the maximum efficiency out of it. So now that we've completely broken down Ghost Rider, everything that he brings to the table, it is time for us to determine where he belongs over here on our tier list. Now, as a reminder, I am ranking the individual tiers or tiering the characters that fall within the tiers themselves. So where do I think Ghost Rider belongs? He is definitely one of the better characters on the roster, and because of that, I can't place him down as low as some of the other characters that we've ranked. And after thinking about how useful he really can be, especially from a crowd control standpoint, I think that he fits very comfortably in the A tier, but at this point in time, he fits back behind Captain America, Daredevil, and Captain Marvel. There may be some other characters that come along later that he ranks a little bit better than within that A tier, but for now I think that's a very solid placement for him. But what do you think? Do you agree with that ranking? Do you agree with my breakdown? Do you have any disagreements or feel like there's things that I've missed? Be sure to let me know your thoughts in Be sure to let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. And with all that being said, thanks again for watching, and I hope that you have an absolutely fantastic rest of your day.